Now, I see a record button pushed anyway. So I'm going to go with it. Those of you who may have just joined us online, sorry, we had some technical difficulties here. So we are following the line of Canaan. I was giving a long explanation that says there is some speculation, but it's not anti-biblical. How's that? You can make it fit in the text. Okay, now, so we begin to follow here, and Canaan begat Sidon. Sidon in the New Testament is Sidon in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, other than two places right here, Sidon is spelled Zidon in the Old Testament. Don't be confused by Zidon. It's the same place. Zidon with a Z, Sidon with an S, same place. It uses the Hebrew letter that is often, when we transliterate it, it's TZ. Is the word there. So Sidon. Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth. Now Sidon is in the New Testament. You've got Sidon, the Tyre and Sidon. Sidon is a longtime enemy, and that longtime enemy is never going to do anything other than be an enemy of the Lord. So, and when you come to places like Ezekiel and Jeremiah, both, Sidon is marked out for special punishment in eschatology. Sidon is not going to make it. So there's Sidon. And then you have Heth. Does anyone know, or does anybody remember, who the father of or who the descendants of Heth are called? Sort of like the Hethites, but not. They would be the Hittites. You've heard of the Hittites before. The Hittites are Canaanites. Now, let me say, all Canaanites are either from Sidon or from Heth. They are descendants from Sidon or Heth. There are I say that they're all descendants of Canaan. That's why they're called Canaanites, because as you get here further, you've got, beginning in verse 16, the Jebusite, the Amorite, the Girgasite, the Hivite, the Archite, the Sinite, the Aravite, the Zimmerite, the Hemathite, and afterwards the family of Canaan spread abroad. How's that? That's a lot of ites through there. Usually the preacher throws in termite just to be fun. You've got all these ites that come and are a part of these descendants of Canaan. Now, all of these, sometimes you will even find Canaanite mixed in with some of these in the Bible. It might say the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgasites, as you're reading along. All Canaanites, all the other ites are Canaanites also. So it just depends on how that wording goes on and is carried out there. So you got all those Canaanites. Now you may remember, as you meet the Canaanites, that let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. And we've got that neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor thy daughter shalt, or the other way around. For thou wilt turn away thy son from following me. They may serve other gods. So the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you and destroy thee suddenly. They were forbidden from marrying any of the Canaanites. They were also then forbidden basically forbidden for keeping them alive. They were supposed to get rid of all Canaanites. And they were not instructed that, by the way, for, say, the Moabites. They could let the Moabites live, the Edomites, the Ammonites, these others that were the Babylonians even. There was never a command, destroy every Babylonian that lives, but there was a command to destroy the Canaanites. Now, why? I think same reason that God sent the flood. God sent the flood to get rid of the Nephilim. God sent the Israelites to get rid of the Nephilim. He wanted to get rid of the Nephilim through the Canaanites, who happened to be, I think, bringing in this line of Cain, if you will, into this issue. So let's, with that, begin to look at the Nephilim. We've got Nephilim out of the flood. How do they come in from this line of Canaan? Let's go to Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, and see the first of them. And we've got Numbers 13:33. There we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come from the giants. We were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Okay, you know the story. They send the 12 spies in. Moses sends the 12 spies in, and they come back and they give her the report, and the report is, there we saw the giants. Would anyone like to guess what the Hebrew word for giants is? You win. Nephilim. Nephilim. There we saw the Nephilim. The King James always translates the word Nephilim into giants. It is one of these words that's a little bit difficult because there's not a good English word that describes what it is. As we talked about last week, they are the fallen ones from Nephil, the Hebrew word for Nephilim, the fallen ones. But they are, when you look at them, you can spot them, not because they fell and they can't get up, but because they are giants. And so they are described really as giants. In some of the more modern translations, they began to just call them Nephilim there. And why did they begin to call them Nephilim? Probably because by the time the modern translations came about in about 1900, we had adopted the word Nephilim into the English language, and so you could use it. In 1611, they didn't use the word Nephilim, and so it was not there. So it's translated as giants. Now, these giants are the sons of Anak, which come from the giants. That's interesting. The sons of Anak, which come from the Nephilim. Okay, you got Nephilim before, you got Nephilim after. The Nephilim after come from the ones before. That means you've got to have a connection somewhere. As I mentioned once already, the Jews do have a connection. They say that one of them survived the flood by floating on a log. And he floated on a log for a year, and therefore he survived. That is a bit of speculation. At least my speculation has some hint of it in the text. I know you can't prove it to the ladies and gentlemen of a jury to win the court case, but it's a lot better, I think, than, well, one grabbed a log and floated on it. The truth is, you have to have some story. You have to say, how did Anak come from the Nephilim? So you can say, pardon the buzzing, we got something going on there. You can say, well, one of them floated on a log, and there you have it. Or you can say one of them was floating on a cloud. Or you could say one of them turned into pixie dust and then reconstituted himself. You can come up with whatever you want. I just think I have the most biblical come up with something. Even though it is a bit of a stretch here nonetheless. So the sons of Anak, which come from the giants, there they are. The sons of Anak happen to be of the Canaanites. We're not exactly sure which son, Sidon, Heth, the Hittites. Most likely the Hittites is one of the sons of Anak, or Anak, the father of them, comes from the Hittites. Heth. And the reason we say that is because, I'm not going through all the scriptures, but if you follow it, the Hittites lived right in this area. We know that that's where the Hittites were. And then you go to this area and there's the sons of Anak. So a specific group of the Hittites would be the sons of Anak. The sons of Anak are often called the Anakim. That's just Anak in plural. And so if you hear Anakim, that's typically the giants. There they are, the giants. So you've got the Anakim is one form of these. Now let's look at Joshua chapter 11, because we're trying to trace these and say, okay, well, what happened to these giants? We know that they came into that the children of Israel 40 years later came into the promised land. We assume the giants didn't all die out in these 40 years. So what happened to them? Let's go to Joshua, Joshua chapter 11, verses 21 and 22. And we have, at that time came Joshua and cut off the Anakims from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir. Oh, Hebron, by the way, that's that's this area. Hebron is the area where Abraham later bought the cave of Machpelah to bury Sarah in, and it is the place where King David was king for 7.5 years before he came into Jerusalem. So they cut off. Joshua cut off the Anakims. This is the people that 40 years later, all but Joshua said, we can't go, they're too big, we'll never make it. Joshua, 40 years later, he had voted for it 40 years earlier. 40 years later, he and Caleb go in and they cut off the Anakim from the mountains. It lists the places here that they are. And Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. Now, if we stopped right there, we would say, okay, no more Anakim. However, there's this interesting verse in verse 22, says there were none of the Anakim left in the land of the children of Israel. Not so fast. Except in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod, there remained. Okay, we got rid of most of the Anakim at the conquest. That's our giants left over. Get rid of most of them, except Gaza, Gath, Ashdod. Now, does any of that ring a bell for a later Bible story? Yeah, it does. We got Goliath, who comes from Gath. Goliath, the Gathite. By the way, Gathites are sometimes called Gittites. So Goliath, and we haven't got to it in the story of David yet, but we will. Goliath also has, I want to say, 5 brothers or 4 brothers or a number of brothers anyway. They are all going to end up dead. So most of the Anakim die, except a few in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod there remain. Now, let's speculate a little bit. Could the Anakim still live today? We got 2 things going against it. One is that everyone that we know of who is a giant, like Goliath and his brothers, ends up getting killed somewhere in the biblical story later on down. So they're dead, as far as we know, in terms of the names. But it doesn't ever say, like when Goliath's brothers die, I wish it did, but it doesn't say, and thus ended the Anakim. I wish it said that. You could kind of surmise, okay, there's no more, otherwise they would have come up somewhere and we would have fought them or whatever. But we could assume that seems to be the last one, that Goliath and his brothers were the last of the line of the Anakim. Now, Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod became the place of the Philistines. And actually, it became the place of the Philistines just prior to the time of the conquest. The Philistines are not Canaanites. Now, Goliath was sort of a Philistine, but he was a Canaanite who lived among the Philistines and had assimilated in with the Philistines, but what would you call it? In his genealogy, his family tree, he was not a Philistine. The Philistines, from what we know, and this is a pretty solid argument here, from what we know, the Philistines they were a seafaring people that came probably, let's say, the Greek Isles, and about 50 years maybe at the most, prior to the conquest of Joshua, the Philistines moved in. All along the coast of the Mediterranean there were the Philistines. Now, the Philistines then were a problem in the time of the judges with Samson. They were a problem in the time of Saul with Goliath. They were a problem with the time of David. And that's where you had, even last week, we looked at the story in the valley of the Rephaim. Maybe we'll get to it here in a moment. The valley of Rephaim, that was Philistine territory, and that was giant territory too, by the way. And the Philistines last longer after that, but they begin to die out. And honestly, what happens is the Philistines just sort of disappear from history. Now, that happens to people groups. They disappear from history. So the two things going against Anakim living today, one is every Anakim we know, we killed. Two is, even if there was some of that, there is this thing of, John knows his genealogy better than, not genealogy, what do you call it when you mix genes? Genetics, that's the word I'm trying to, John knows his genetics better than I do. But I think that if you keep mixing genetics on and on, you come to the point where a particular trait becomes indistinguishable that might be carried out through there. I'm sure it's there somewhere, but it gets so watered down. Is that a good way to put that? Is that scientific? If you take a Hatch chili and keep mixing it in with a Pueblo chili, eventually you're neither going to have a Hatch chili nor a Pueblo chili, right? Okay, good. So the Philistines, they end up, so if there's Anakim left, it's so minuscule that it would be hard to pick it up on a, what is it, My 21, Me and 21, what's that? Ancestry.com thing. Yeah, I think it becomes impossible to pick up there any more than if you do one of those tests. I'm sure that we're all a whole bunch of everything as Americans, right? We're mutts. So all of that has. I know this one works. All dogs used to be wolves. Now it's hard to find a wolf. So all Anakim were giants. If there's any left, it's so watered down that it has become a poodle by now, and impossible to pull out. Now, that is the Anakim. So we know the Anakim are Canaanites. We know that the Canaanites were all destroyed except a few in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. The named ones we have from Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod, we saw their death. And then we have experienced the dissolution, what would you call that? The disappearance, I'll use that word, the disappearance of the Philistines into the peoples. So there's that family. Then there's another family, and that's the Rephaim. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 10 and 11, and see the Rephaim. It says, which also accounted for, which also were I really should go to verse 10. In verse 10, the Emims dwelt there in times past, a people great and many and tall as the Anakim, which also were accounted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites call them Emims. Now, we're just going to use the word Rephaim. The Moabites call them Emims. Here it says that they were great. Then they were great, many and tall as the Anakims, which also were accounted. Now here it uses a different word. It uses the word Rephaim. Rephaim is really just another word for giant. So sometimes they're called Rephaim. It's described as giants, but that's not completely what it means as giants. But here, let me just say, before I forget this, Emim is another word for Rephaim. There's another one, Zazuzim, that the Ammonites called these people the Zazuzim. So they got different names, but they are the Rephaim. Now, one of the interesting Rephaim is given to us in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 11, where it says, "For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabath unto the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man." So he gives us the measurements of this guy's bed. He is a very big king. And it says, again, he remained of the remnant of the giants. Now that tells us there's not much. Maybe it even tells us he's the last of the Rephaim. He's the only one there, and he remained of the remnants of the giants. And we know that he is going to be killed here. I'll show you in a minute. But let's go to Joshua chapter 12, verses 4 and 5. As we follow these Rephaim, and the coast of Og, king of Bashan, which was of the remnant of the giants, that second time we're told that dwelled at Ashtaroth and at Edrei. He reigned in Mount Hermon and in Salcah and in all Bashan unto the border of the Geshurites and all these people. It basically tells us we won't go through the map, but it tells us the reign of King Og, which was a very big reign. Now, let's look at one more. Numbers chapter 21, verse 35. Where we have King Og, they smote him and his sons and all his people until there was none left him alive, and they possessed his land. And all God's people said, this one, that's what I wish we had with the Anakim, saying they smote them, they smote their sons, nobody is left alive. Doesn't say that with the Anakim, but I think we can surmise it. Here it says with the Rephaim, the last of the remnant we've got of the Rephaim is King Og. They killed King Og, they killed his sons, they killed all his people until there was none left him alive. That looks like the end of the Rephaim there. I think if you're going to continue the Rephaim on beyond that, it's going to be difficult. Now, the interesting thing is, once you get past Goliath and his brothers, and once you get past Og and his brothers, we don't really see these people again. There's no more giants left in the Bible after that. So it looks like now we have eradicated this line of Cain. If we're going to jump through the ark and get it out, I think we can get it. In tracing Cain, I think we've come to the end of the line, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think we can even speculate any further to get. I was kind of hoping to get to Judas because I wanted him included. But I see no way to get to Judas other than just totally make it up. So I think we're going to end it right here with the end of the Rephaim. Almost. Let me say one other thing. I say the Rephaim and the Anakim are gone. I am not a believer that I've toyed with the idea, but I'm not a believer that there are, let's just use the overarching term Nephilim, that there are Nephilim on the earth today. I think all the Nephilim are gone. I think there were Nephilim. I think when you come across transhuman giant remains, if you do, I'm always a little bit skeptical when I see pictures on the internet, but if you do come across remains like this of 9, 10, 11, 12 foot skeletons or whatnot, I think you've got one of these relatives of the Canaanites that is there. But I think they're all gone. I don't think they're existing today. But we might see them again. How's that? In the book of Job, There's an interesting word. Let's see. Do I have it here? I didn't put that one on your outline. In the book of Job. No, yeah, I did. Job 26:5. It says, dead things, it's nice, isn't it? Dead things are formed under the waters and the inhabitants thereof. Okay, what I want to focus on is dead things are formed under the waters. What is kind of interesting is that the word dead right here is Rephaim. Rephaim, we know about those. Rephaim, described as giants, comes from the root for dead. Nephilim comes from the root for fallen. Rephaim comes from dead. So here the translators had said, okay, let's make this dead instead of Rephaim. But if you were reading in the Hebrew or transliterated it, Rephaim are formed from under the waters. Now here's another, okay, I'm going to make another jump, but we do it sometimes. The difference is I tell you. Formed is the same word in Hebrew for weight. Formed, and you can go either way with this. It's all contextual. So this could say, Rephaim wait under the waters. Could it be that Job is telling us, or it's being revealed here in the book of Job, that the Rephaim are waiting under the waters? If so, let's tie that with 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 19 and 20, where Peter says, by also which Christ went, and preached unto the spirits in prison. What spirits? The one in verse 20, which sometime were disobedient when once the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah. Disobedient spirits in the days of Noah. Well, we might call those giants. Jesus goes and preaches, I think proclaims victory to the spirits in prison. Now, the whole scenario is there was a satanic conspiracy to take out the messianic line. If we can pollute the messianic line with a satanic line, then no son is going to be born of a woman, which will crush the serpent on the head. So with that then, the Lord sends the flood to wipe them out. Through Nehemiah, a few of them survive. They make it as far as King Og, or as Goliath and his brothers. Then they're gone. The Lord puts all of them, both the pre-flood and the post-flood, puts them in prison. The Rephaim wait under the waters. Could the prison be the place for these spirits to be? In the deep, let's call it, down in the deep of the earth, and the Lord goes and preaches to them. Now, let's look at one more, Isaiah 26, 13 and 14, where there's this word of praise here, O Lord our God. Other lords beside thee have dominion over us, but by thee only will we make mention of thy name. They are dead, they shall not live. That little phrase right there is what I want to look at. They are dead, they shall not live. They are deceased, they shall not rise. Okay. We know that there's a resurrection for every human, right? The quick and the dead, as we sometimes say. There is a resurrection. But here it says, they are dead, they shall not live. They are deceased, they shall not rise. Would anyone like to guess what word dead is in Hebrew? Rephaim. They are Rephaim, they shall not live. This is another form of Rephaim and deceased. They are deceased, they are Rephaim, they shall not rise. Now, that would say that, it would not say that there's not an existence. It says that they're not human enough to be involved in the resurrection of humans. They're dead, they're not coming back, they are in prison. They're going to be kept in prison. Now, I only see one possibility that the Rephaim or the Anakim or the Nephilim might visit the earth one more time. This one is going to be a bit of a stretch. But do you remember in, I think it's Revelation chapter 9. It's in the book of Revelation, the middle part of the book of Revelation. There is a bottomless pit. And someone, I think Satan, is given a key to the bottomless pit. He is allowed to open up the bottomless pit, and these spirits come out of the bottomless pit, and they have a run on the earth, not a free run because there's only certain things they can do, but they have they run the earth again for 5 months, as I recall, and then they have to go back in the bottomless pit. It's not a resurrection. Resurrection is a resurrection unto judgment. See what happens. That's for humans. But there are these things that let out of the abyss, the bottomless pit. Could it be those spirits kept in prison? If so, they've been in prison for, I don't know, if we go back to the days of Noah, let's call it 4,500 years. 3,500 years. Get my chronology right here. For 3,500 years, they've been in prison. They get out and they're mad. And they wreak their havoc. One other thing, could it be then also, because the timing works out, that the Ezekiel 38-39 war, which is the battle of Gog and Magog, could Gog be Og? I don't know. But Gog is certainly, let's call him a satanic figure, whether he's used of Satan or he is Og, not raised again, but his soul's allowed to come up. He becomes king, Og and Magog and all that, and he carries out then what becomes the battle of Gog and Magog. Maybe so. So all that, again, is a bit of speculation there, but it highlights the fact that you've got certainly spiritual warfare when it comes to those end times. How does all that come to play? I don't completely know, but I do know that is the end of our Tracing Cain series. That's as far as we can take him. If we go any further, we'll start making stuff up. So we have seen Cain and traced Cain. Next week or the week after, I may have a filler next week, I'm not sure. Next week or the week after, we're going to do a little series, I don't know the name of it, but I'll tell you what it's about. What if Paul never came along? What would Christianity be like if we didn't have Paul? I'm going to contend that we would be Jewish. Paul's the one that brings this dispensation of the grace of God. So we're going to look at Christianity sans Paul. How's that? Starting next week. And those of you online, thanks again for joining us. Sorry we had a technical glitch at the beginning of the hour. We'll be back in just a moment for our worship service because I went late today. But the crowds were just so enthralled that they would not allow me to stop. Or something like that. Let me lead us in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thanks for your watch care over us again, your goodness. These Rephaim, Anakim, Nephilim, all very interesting, and we have tried to make some kind of a reasonable approach about what might have happened, but just pray that if it's wrong, we'd forget it soon. If it's right, so that we would contemplate it some more and try to figure out how to put it together in even a stronger argument. And thanks for the joy we've had of digging deep into this Cain story, often so ignored other than the fact that he killed his brother, and that's about all that's known. And we have learned so much in these 7 weeks, and thank you for that. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, God bless you. Let's start again here in about 5, 6, 7 minutes.
Where do they think the tomb of Noah is?